Good evening. It is Tuesday, June 14th. It's been a while since I did an update about where I'm at with HK Ventures LLC and the Bunker Project 501c3. So I thought it was important that I get back on here and do that. As you may know, our founder, Dr. Bud Brown, William Brown, passed away about a month or so ago. And it hit me really hard because he's been my primary mentor for several years now, since I met him during the senior year of my bachelor's degree, and he's been kind of guiding me along all the way through a PhD, which I don't know, got about a year left on or so, depending on how long it takes me to write the dissertation. So I had originally thought about just not continuing with the PhD program and just kind of stopping at the master's, since the PhD program that I'm in is sociology, and it just doesn't really apply a whole lot to what has actually been providing my main means of living, real estate. And just kind of runs counterintuitive, to that, as far as being a critique of capitalism, but then I'm engaging in capitalism at the same time. So it just seems, I don't know, like the two are just very conflictual in a way. What else? Sociology, and then of course you got all the heavy politics that go along with sociology. So I've still made the decision that I don't think I want to go into academia as a career. I don't want to be a professional researcher or professor. I'd rather leave those positions open up to someone of a different bias. There's this idea that all science is biased, and it's all been mostly biased from a white male perspective, at least all the science we've had over the last few hundred years. So let's get some different biases in there, especially when you're studying human beings as a group, sociology specifically. So yeah, that's the idea kind of there behind not continuing with the PhD, or academia as a career anyway. But I do want to finish the PhD, and one reason for that is just simply been at it for a long time. Just seems like a shame to just kind of toss that to the side, and it shows commitment, just sticking with something and finishing it, especially from this close to being done. Just getting into a PhD program kind of puts you in a top 1% sort of level anyway, because most people can't even get into a PhD program, let alone finish. The rate of people who actually get into and finish a PhD is like less than 1% of the population. Pretty low. So that's an accomplishment in itself that I'm pretty proud of. But I do want to finish, and one of the other reasons for that is, first I didn't think I was going to be able to finish because of my dissertation, and the original topic idea was focused on criminal justice, veterans involved in the criminal justice system. And so I was going to use Dr. Brown's data that he collected over several years, about 10 years, doing interviews with veterans who found themselves in the criminal justice system, and he would presented in the courts about that and stuff like that. So he was in the process of redacting all personal information from that data so it could be shared with me, so I could write my dissertation about veterans in the criminal justice system based on this aggregate data from military veterans in the criminal justice system, and then comparing that with military veterans who ask the same questions, not who have never been involved in the criminal justice system, and just see are there any differences, or are the differences, if there are any, that kind of stuff. To try to hone in as a criminologist on, what are those factors that contribute to criminality the most, what are the highest, strongest correlations, and then how can we focus in on those with policy, and try to reduce crime. It's the whole idea of criminology. So that was the idea of the paper, but now that he's gone, that would be quite impossible to do, since he didn't finish redacting all that information. So getting it from him, from the family, would be a challenge. And with institutional review boards as finicky as they are now, they really don't like to approve any sort of controversial or just any sort of research that could potentially lead to any sort of like human rights violation, privacy rights violation, anything like that, not even remotely. So like this, it would be a challenge to get a hold of that data and be able to prove to the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, that no one got access to the personal information, other than the person who redacted it. And that would probably have to be some sort of third party that'd be approved. It's kind of a big hassle. So I decided to instead focus on the Bunker Project. So for what I'm doing with the Bucker project right now, we are in the process of selling the house in Las Vegas, and there are quite a few reasons for that. It's not just a lack of funding. That is one issue, but for the years before, like I've always found a way to pull it together. Like, I can sell stuff off, I can make some personal sacrifices in my life, beg, borrow, and steal. Well, not steal, but beg and borrow. That's kind of what being a nonprofit leader is all about. It's professional begging in a way. So anyway, I could have done that like I have in the past, and but then it would just be me struggling through another summer, and selling off my personal items. So I'd probably sell off my mountain bike. It's a few $1,000s there. Maybe sell off the camera I got for video editing once I get to the point where I'm doing a little bit more cool stuff in the multifamily commercial real estate space. So at that point, I'd like to actually use that camera. So I really don't want to continue selling off my personal items like that. I don't really want to, make the sacrifices for my family. Even right now, like I've had to postpone not paying child support. I asked if I could wait until the end of the month to pay, so that way we could sell off the house in Vegas. And that way I can also pay the guys who are currently in the house, giving them a cash for keys arrangement. That's what we're doing. So I'm giving them $750 each to help out with their move on to their next place. If they need to take some furniture or whatever, work that out. Like, been trying to refer them to every other nonprofit that's out there that might be able to help them in any way. If you have a room for rent in Las Vegas, please let me know. I will be happy to share that with them. And what else? I think that's about it as far as the guys in the house. They're I don't know, some are relieved. A couple of them seem like kind of relieved. At least one of them, the house manager, seems relieved that we're selling the house and he gets to move on and get his own place. He's gotten himself into a pretty amazing position from where he started at, and I'll go into all the details on that in my dissertation. But starting from homeless, in the tunnels, heavily addicted to years of sobriety and solid job, enrolled in school. Unfortunately, that's one of the issues with selling this house, is now he's dropped out of school. That's what this house was about, was trying to help veterans stay in school. That was the whole focus, because with the gaps in the GI Bill, it makes it difficult. So a lot of veterans don't use their GI Bill. They never go to school. So that's what I was trying to do, was trying to help veterans utilize the benefits that are there for them. So one being, the GI Bill, the main one. I'll get into all that in the dissertation. That's a good 300-page paper, to describe all the science that I utilized to develop this program, or all the theoretical basis behind it. It's not just like me saying, oh, I'm a combat veteran, so I can, just create my own program based on my own experiences. That's what a lot of organizations are doing. And it's kind of why you see a lot of the stuff not really making any difference. Anyway, it's just my opinion, I guess. But yeah, the nonprofit thing that hit me pretty hard, shutting it down. So it's just, the lack of funding is probably the biggest issue, but then there's also the lack of support from my boards. I have more of an inactive board, and I set them up that way originally because I wanted to be able to have full control, as much control of my program as I could. Because really a nonprofit isn't owned by me. It's not owned by the board. It's a public entity. It's just like any government agency. It exists to serve the public. So that's that with the nonprofit. I don't know, got distracted. But anyway, yeah, nonprofit. So we got the inactive board. So that's one issue, is, I ended up having to do everything, which was okay when I was setting up myself and willing to just kind of fund things out of my own pocket. But then I had a kid, and now I can't really do that as much. I need to focus on supporting my family first, get my own gas mask on kind of thing, and then I can go focus on helping the nonprofit. So that's kind of one of the other reasons of selling the house, is to be able to step back, focused on getting my own family in order, my own finances, my own situation in order, so that way I can restart this again and I can do it properly. And so one of the other couple issues with that are, the way I bought the house was one of the biggest issues. And I bought it out with my own personal VA loan with the faith that I would eventually raise enough funds to then convert it over to a conventional loan in the Bunker Project's name, so it's not owned by me at all, and just didn't get to that point. And and that's been the biggest kind of stickler with raising funds, is that no one's willing to give funds to a house that I own personally. If I own the house personally and I'm running the nonprofit, it creates a lot of liability issues, between the house and the nonprofit and myself, and that creates a lot of risk toward, anyone who might invest with me. It creates risk toward my son, my family. If something were to happen, I get sued or just whatever. So that's another side of the nonprofit. Just needing to kind of get out from under having my own personal loan, my own personal name attached to the nonprofit. It's one of the other sides. And a third issue is the issue of a president, that I've been serving in both the role of the president and the role of like board chairman, and doing secretary and the treasurer, and just kind of doing all of it. And it's a little too much for me to be doing as one person. It's way too much for me doing as one person. And then trying to manage the house from now a state away. So I live in Surprise, Arizona. The house is in Las Vegas. So that 4-hour distance was too much. I really needed the veterans in the house to step up more than kind of what they were doing. So I was still having to drive up there, still having to deal with all the petty stuff in the house. One person, this guy cooking, or this guy not throwing his food away, or I don't know, garbage piling up, making the house smell, leaving your laundry in the washer, all the little things that come, all the little annoyances that come with roommates. I can't be dealing with that stuff myself if I've got a house manager there in the house, and if I'm trying to build, develop a whole bunch of houses. That's just a little too much. So I can focus on one house if I'm going to do this all by myself, essentially, like I can do it by myself with one house, but that's not how a nonprofit is supposed to be run. A nonprofit is supposed to be, about the community. It's supposed to be supported by the community. It's supposed to be, board led, not single individual led. So that's kind of where we're at with the nonprofit. Why? So some of the reasons of why it's being shut down, or at least the house in Vegas is being shut down, so I can restart it later. If we'd gotten some help, some large financial donations came through large enough to get through the summer, like I probably would have continued it through at least but then we would get to the winter and it would be the same thing, having to figure out, okay, how we're going to raise the money to get through the winter. Because every time there's a break, that's when the veterans in the house aren't paying rent. And I set it up that way, so they can stay focused on school, even though I know that's a losing venture. And the whole idea of it being a losing venture is, well, it's a nonprofit. It's supposed to be dependent on community donations. And then when I started, once I got that conflict of interest cleared up, so I moved out. So that's one of the reasons I moved to Surprise, Arizona, because originally I was living in the house doing house manager myself. This is a pilot project, so I wanted to do all the roles myself, starting from the very bottom, and go through it that way so I really had a full understanding of how everything works, or the best way to do things, or that kind of thing. So when I was living in the house, it's under my personal loan. I can't raise any money, just that's huge risk of fraud, being accused of fraud. And it really would be fraud if I'm raising money for my own house, living in it, and it's all that kind of stuff. So during that time, I never tried to raise any money, and any money that was given to me, to the nonprofit, I made it a point to then give it away to some other nonprofit. We did a charitable golf tournament where I got $1,000. It's given to us, so I'd use that for the golf tournament. And there was a veteran who was living by a river. So I gave him $1,000 in donations, and didn't start asking for donations until I had moved out completely and had drawn up a no conflict doctrine letter with a lawyer and a lease between my LLC and just between me personally. This is my personal house and personal loans. So between me personally and the Bunker Project, again, to show that there's no conflict of interest, because there's no profit being made. There's no large profit being made, way under market rate. So it's a charity. If you're not charging market rate, you're running a charity. If you didn't know that. So anyway, but once I moved out and started getting a little bit more aggressive, with my fundraising, begging, or whatever, posting regular fundraisers on Facebook, tried to buy the fourplex and try these different entrepreneurial things in that regard. None of those have really panned out to be profitable enough yet. Ironically, once I sell the house and the fourplex, I'm selling both, my fourplex and the house. So just to kind of pick up entirely out of Vegas and just be sort of, other than finishing my PhD, sort of detached from that city altogether. It's just too difficult for me to manage from another state away, and just, I don't know. When it's a nonprofit, that needs donations and volunteers and that kind of stuff. The few people I was trying to reach out to get someone to be a president, with the idea that, especially if it was a president who could raise their own funds, or something like that. I had a couple people who I thought could do that, but they were really just looking for me to offer them a salary, and so that wasn't really going to work out. One of them got real angry and started making a bunch of accusations, and that was around the same time that Dr. Brown died. Struggling financially to get through the summer, and just, these things kind of piled up, and it was kind of like, that was one of the other reasons of just shut it down. It was like, if somehow we've gotten this negative reputation in Vegas, or I have, and, probably just because of how I founded it, by using my own personal loan to get it off the ground, because it was like going around and presenting, about the nonprofit, talking about the idea. There's thousands of nonprofits out there who all have great ideas, similarly great ideas. And, the answer is always, well, what skin do you have in the game? What are you bringing to the table? And so my thinking was that by using my own personal loan, by putting my own self at risk, to do this pilot project, then that shows that I'm not a scammer, that I'm not trying to take advantage of veterans, that I'm using my own personal stuff, to test this out, see if it'll work. That's been the whole point of these videos. It's just, again, transparency. Everywhere I can be transparent as possible, because I know that, like, yes, it is an issue with me owning the house out in my own personal name. So now we're selling the house. It won't be in my personal name. So I don't know if that will entice donors later on once I start this again. Whether I start it again as a nonprofit, for veterans, or whether I start it as just a thing. Maybe I shut down the Bunker Project entirely and just focus on, I don't know, youth, kind of like the support, just like youth sports programs. There's a lot of research around criminal justice that says the students who stay connected to extracurricular school activities in some way, it doesn't really matter what the activity is, just as long as they're connected to something like that, something structured after school, they are, like, I don't know, 80% less likely, something super ridiculous, less likely to end up in the criminal justice system as adults. So that was one of the options. But or the board was talking about just maybe we could start it again, but we just started as a scholarship. So we just do, like, 4 months, you get, and we'll pay your rent. We'll have, like, an arrangement with your landlord. He'll pay your rent when you're not receiving BAH or something like that, as like a scholarship, in exchange for, maintaining your grades. That would be a lot simpler. Then we wouldn't have to own any real estate. But there is one thing, though, I learned today, called I think it was Section 170 of the IRS code. And that gives nonprofits first priority to buy certain properties, like foreclosures and stuff. And, that's a huge benefit if you can have, first option or first ability or whatever like that. So that's a good way to get houses in an affordable way. It's a way for people to donate, so they can sell their property to the nonprofits, or essentially donate it. So, like, say you sell the property to the nonprofit for $700,000. They pay you $400,000 for the house, and the other $300,000 you get to write off, or something like that. However we make it work. So there's that. People want to donate houses, they can do that through Section 170. So that's that option. What else? I don't know. I am raising for a couple deals. So I have 2 multifamily projects, one through a sponsor. It's called Park Hills. I think it's 272 units, and it's just a traditional multifamily project. But on that one, it's already been closed. It closed 5 months ago. And what happened was someone had agreed that they're going to put in $750,000 of 1031 money. So a 1031 exchange is when you take all the profit from one property and you roll it over to another property that's of equal or greater value and somewhat similar, so maybe a residential property to a residential property or something like that. My plan with the fourplex is to take all of that profit from the fourplex. So right now I have it listed at $599,000. So that'd be, I don't know, probably good at $180,000 or so in profit. That I will then take over and roll into something larger, some kind of like larger syndication, with passive income, that kind of thing. And that way I can focus on finishing up my PhD and not have to be bogged down by dealing with tenants and repairs and stuff on a multifamily project, unless it's one that I'm actually like directly working on. So if we get this development, if we get one of these developments going, I'll be working real hard on the development, finishing up the PhD, and then I've got my money privately invested in passive deals that I don't have to really do anything on. I just get the updates, and that's the whole point of being a limited partner and what I've been trying to entice other people to invest with me for, so you can be a limited partner as well. Collect mailbox money, invest in real estate without actually having to do any of the hard work of real estate. So over the last few years, that's what I realized is, trying to do real estate on your own by yourself is really, really hard. I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons you don't see a lot of people into the houses, single family homes, and more people are moving toward the multifamily side, because you get that economies of scale, you get that ability to just put in your money and have a team that does everything, team of experts. So that's pretty cool. So yes, we've got that one with the $750,000 raise, and I've got another one. It's a hotel conversion in Florida, converting from a hotel, I think it was a La Quinta Inn, to a what are we converting this into? A senior living facility. That's what it is. An active adult, like 55 and older, senior living facility. So that's pretty cool by itself. And that one, minimum investment in that one is $50,000, and it's a $4 million raise total. So you can put in up to $4 million or a minimum of $50,000. And I think at $100,000 a year, you get back 23% or so IRR, so individual rate of return. So that's kind of like your rate of return overall if the investment is done. So this is like a 5-year hold. That means a little bit of the percentage will come from your quarterly distributions from the monthly rents, and at the very end, sell the property and get a big chunk of the equity. And then also, if rates come down and prices are high, the market is ripe for it, then maybe at some point along the way they refinance to get your money back to you even sooner. So that's one of the goals in multifamily, is to continually reinvest. So the idea is to put the money in up front, so you $100,000, $200,000, whatever. It's like on the Waco deal, working with an investor who put in $250,000, and so after that, once we've got the property built, we'll reappraise it, refinance it, as a result of that reappraisal at a much higher level, because now there's a brand new apartment complex on there that before it was just an old piece of dirt. So at that point, we'll be able to cash him out. So give him back his full $250,000 plus a bunch more, because it'll appraise for a lot higher than what we bought it for, or what we built it for. And then his money, his initial investment though, will stay in there. So his initial $250,000 will stay in for the rest of the 10 years. So over the rest of the 10 years, he'll still be making money off of that apartment complex, right? He'll still getting his either monthly or quarterly. I think we're talking about doing monthly, but usually quarterly is average distributions. And then at the end, a big chunk of equity at the end of 10 years. And this is a capital gains waived project because it was built in a opportunity zone. So there's that. And the idea here of trying to get the thing built, refinance to get him his money back as quick as possible, so that way we can then go do another deal. We can then go find another plot of land and build something else. So like the project I was looking at earlier today, that was a scrape and build. So we're gonna scrape down, I think it was like a 2 or 3 story building, office building, and then rebuild a new 4 or 5 story one in its place. So that was the idea with that. But anyway, I'm rambling a lot, just like I always do when I get on here. I doubt anybody watches these all the way through, but it gives me a good chance to, I don't know, for me this is more like a verbal journal, really, just sort of dump it on to the camera, dump it onto here, and then it gives me a place, if nothing else, that I can go back and just sort of reflect and see where I was at, a year ago, 2 years ago, 6 months ago, whatever. See how things have changed, or have things stayed consistent, or all that kind of thing. So a lot of times these videos aren't even really for you, honestly. But if you do watch, thank you. Thank you for your support so far and along the way. If you are interested in either of those multifamily projects I'm currently raising money on, would like to get in on that and make some great returns for yourself, now is a good time to do that, especially. So like tomorrow, I don't know if you know, but the Fed has announced they're going to raise, or likely, more than likely, going to raise interest rates another 75 basis points. That's 0.75% tomorrow. So that means if you last week had a lender say you can get a loan for 6%, then maybe this week, at least on a residential, on a house, not necessarily for, again, not for multifamily, because multifamily goes by a different system. They don't go by the Fed rate. They go by something called LIBOR and something else. Anyway, those are different rates. So the commercial rates aren't going up as high as the residential rates. So like your residential rate, like last week you might have got 6% quoted from your lender, and then this week if you go to close, they probably can't give you that same 6%. This week it'll be, by the end of this week, it'll be probably mid 7%. And then the rates are also supposed to go up another 0.75% by the end of this year. So it's supposed to do 2 rate hikes this year is what they've said. So this is the first one, so there'll be one more by the end of the year. So we're looking at probably 8%, mid 8%, for a good loan, like with good credit, by the end of this year. So that's another reasons it's good time to get in. So the whole thing of buy low, sell high. So that's another reasons why I'm selling right now. Market's high, so sell before it bottoms out. Hopefully I'm catching it early enough. My fear is that I didn't, but hopefully I did, and these will sell and we can reinvest it, and then by the time they sell, we'll wait out a little bit, and as the economy gets tougher and tougher, those people who overpaid or have been living beyond their means or whatever, like they'll start to get into some trouble and they'll start selling their stuff off, and they'll sell their stuff off pretty cheap, because they're just trying to make bills at this point, if they're stretched out too far. So that's kind of one of the ideas there, is sell those, reinvest, and keep going. So but yeah, anyway, so that's that with the the rates going up. So they're going to go up, and as rates go up, we're historically have always dipped into some sort of recession, especially when rates are going up as high as they're going up. It would really kind of stink to see us fall into another recession. I'm hoping just for a correction, which is different. So it's kind of like things just sort of adjust back to a normal level, but not necessarily bottoming out like they did in 2008. So a typical market cycle, 12 to 15 years, every 12 to 15 years there's a correction, and then every 30 years or so, 30, 40 years, there's an actual like full-on recession. So like we had a last major recession in 2008, one before that, like the 80s, and even the 80s could be seen almost more as like a correction, and the 70s, the mid to late 70s was really the last like major recession. And then before that you got the Great Depression, and that's even worse, depression. So they're all kind of degrees of the same thing. Just economy gets tough, things get more expensive than what people's wages can afford, and that kind of stuff. So but that can be a good opportunity, it's for people to step in and help out, if you got the means to purchase and this person needs to sell because they're, for whatever reason, they're upside down, they need to sell, having a buyer right there can save the day, because otherwise you end up in foreclosure, and now you end up with destroyed credit and all that kind of stuff. So, so I don't know, you can look at it being exploitative, or you can look at it as being helpful. I try to see it as being helpful. I happen to have tracked the markets for a while, I guess, or I don't know, it's kind of part of being in the multifamily space, is you got to know your market, got to know what you're up against, what you're getting into, proper due diligence. So that's about it. So I'm gonna end it here. We're at 30 minutes. That's enough. All right, bye.